Hello everybody. I'm going to just introduce you today to our grade 8 mouse project. All of the steps for sewing this little guy are in the video, and you have some chances to do your own little details, your own little creative ideas. The pattern I'm going to link to our Google Classroom. At school we use felt, but it doesn't have to be felt. It can be whatever fabrics you have on hand. And if you have a needle and thread and some fabric, that's all you need. So the best fabric would be fabric that doesn't fray. So something like an old t-shirt or an old sweatshirt. Just get permission before you chop it up. And you'll just be, or old pajamas like flannelette, that will be fine too. So yeah, if you want to make the mouse, find what you have at home, find a needle and thread, and get started. You'll first need to cut the pattern out right along the black line using paper scissors. You want to make the inner ear a different color from the outer ear. Try to cut as smoothly as you can around each pattern piece. Okay, so we're starting to sew the mouse now. So I've taken my needle and thread, I've put my thread through the eye of the needle and then brought both ends down together. And I just want to show you how to tie a knot. We want a knot that's big enough that it's not just going to slip through the felt. So I make a little loop around my finger and put that end through the loop once and twice. So we're wrapping it around twice through the loop. Okay. And then pull that down tight. And then just cut off the little tail of thread that comes after your knot so that your work is always going to look nice and neat. So the first sewing step for the mouse is we're going to take the inner ear and put it on top of the outer ear, okay? And then we're going to do what's called a running stitch in between. So this whole project we're going to be always trying to hide the knot wherever we can. So I'm going to hide the knot in between the layers. Can you see that? I'm going in between so that the knot gets totally hidden. You don't see it on the front or the back. And then the running stitch is the most basic stitch. It's just, I'm going to go back down and then come back up. And I'm trying to make the stitches small and neat and evenly spaced between them, and even sizes. So up and down all the way around the curved part. Right, the bottom edge here, we're going to be doing a different stitch when we go to sew that onto the body of the mouse. But here, this is just the running stitch. Okay, so you'll go all the way around. And then I'll show you how to tie a knot to finish it off. Okay, we're coming up close to the end here, so I think I'll just get one more stitch on the right side. Okay, and you notice a couple of things, that my needle never went off the side and around. It's always just doing that up and down. You also notice that the thread stayed nice and even. You don't want to see like an extra little thread loop there. Always keep your thread even on the needle. Okay, the last little stitch there. So that looks good on the front, and it also looks pretty decent on the back. So on that back side now, I'm going to take one last little tiny stitch, and this is how we're going to tie the end knot for this whole project every time we finish. So first of all, make sure you're tying your knot before your thread gets too short. If you get halfway around the ear and you're running out of thread, tie off a knot like this and then start again with a new thread. So I take that one last little stitch and see that loop forming there. I'm going to straighten it out, make sure it doesn't get tingly. And then I just put my needle back through that loop. Pull the needle, tighten up the thread, and one more time. Last little tiny stitch. And then the needle goes back through the loop. Okay, I just do that twice, and then you can cut your thread. Cut it pretty close. You don't want to have threads hanging off your mouse. Okay, and there's your finished inner ear. Okay, everybody, we are going to do the outside of the ear now with the blanket stitch. So I've got my 2 arms length of thread on my needle, and now I'm going to just review that knot again. So I'm going to go around my finger once, put the tail through the loop once and twice. Okay, and then pull that down like that. Good. Okay. And then I'm going to cut off the tail of thread that comes after the knot because that doesn't look nice. Just cut it like that. Perfect. Alright, so we're doing the blanket stitch around the whole outside edge of the ear. And it's just 1 layer, so I can't hide my knot in between the layers this time. So I'm just going to start like that. And then I'm bringing my thread around and putting my needle in the same spot. And then drawing my needle out inside the loop. That's the key to this whole stitch. You have to have your needle coming out inside the loop. So that's how you get started, being in the same spot. Now I move over 1 stitch width and bring my needle out again inside the loop. And you continue like that. Don't stick your needle in too close to the edge because it'll just pull through this felt, and don't pull your thread too tight. Okay, so nice little small stitches, always like this though, always the thread coming out inside that loop so that it makes these like little number 7s or little L's. Down again, and my needle's always going down, it never changes direction on this stitch, but that's the key right there. Make sure your thread, your needle is coming out inside that loop. Oops, down and through the loop. So you'll just keep going like that until you get all the way around, and then I will show you when I'm done. Okay, so I've made my way all the way around, and then on my last stitch, right at that corner, I'm just going to tie the knot the same way we did with the running stitch. So 1 last little stitch here, right where your needle was coming out, and then back through that little loop. Don't let it get tangled. Do that a 2nd time. Don't let it get tangled. Oh, I got a tangle. If you do get a tangle like that where you've got like a little extra loop, then you just want to use your needle to loosen it up. Good. That'll do. Okay. We're going to be sewing the ears onto the mouse, and you have a choice. You can sew them on flat like that, or you can sew the little pleats so they kind of stand up. Either way is totally okay. It's your choice. I'm going to show you how to do the little pleat one. So I've taken 1 ear, and I'll do it on this one because I'll sew mine on both with the pleat. But take the ear and fold it in half, and then I'm taking a needle with matching thread, and I'm just going to put a few little stitches in here. And again, I'm going to try to hide my knot in between the layers. And then a little stitch over the edge there. Good. And over. And I only need about 3 stitches. And then tie your knot the way we've been doing. 1 last stitch in through the loop. Back. Do that again. And then you can cut that thread. Okay, then I'm going to open it out, and now that flat edge we're going to sew on with the same blanket stitch that we did before. So whether you're sewing it with the flat or the pinched ear, doesn't matter. Now it's the same thing. So I'm going to take my needle with the contrasting thread now, and okay, I'm going to start with a knot on the back. Good. And if the ears are folded, like pinched like that, you can have them a bit closer to the front. If they're flat, you need to go a little further to the back, or else you won't get 2 ears on. Okay. So I can pin it in place, or I can just hold it. And now I'm doing a blanket stitch from right to left, which is not my preference, but I could have started on the left and made my way over, but this will be okay. Alright, so I start the same way we did before, and now this time I'm bringing my thread around and down. It's the same blanket stitch we did on the outside edge, but we're catching into the body there as well. Ah yeah, this pink thread is very tangly. Okay, so just blanket stitching right across that bottom edge. Remember, your needle always comes out in the loop, right like that. Okay, so catching the body every time and making sure your needle gets inside that loop. So you'll do that all the way across. Okay, you get the idea. Blanket stitch right across that bottom edge. When I get to the edge of this ear, right, I'll just keep going on to the other ear and tie our ending knot at the end. Okay. Okay, so the ears are on with that blanket stitch right across the bottom edge. And now we're gonna take buttons for the eyes. So you can find 2 little buttons in the box over there. I'm going to show you how to sew in the ones with the holes, and sometimes you'll find a button like this that just has what's called a shank at the back. I'll show you that too. Okay, so we've got our doubled thread, and I'm just going to see where I want those buttons to sit, and I'm going to actually take a little stitch right where I want the button to sit. Right, I want the button to be right there. So I take that little stitch, the knot's going to be hidden by the button. Now I'm coming up the back of the button, right, and let the button sit on the felt, and then I'm going to go down into the button and then stitch in the same spot again. Now you have a choice. You can either sew across the 2 holes even, or you can sew an X. An X is kind of cute for eyes too. I just always used to doing the 2 parallel lines. So I've made that same stitch in the felt. Now I come back up the button again and down the button and taking a stitch in the same spot again. One more time for those 2 holes. So you remember, you're always going up the button and down the button, never like wrapping around the side. Stitch in the same spot underneath. Now I come up on the other 2 holes, down, and in the same spot in the felt, up and down, stitch in the felt. Last time, up the button, down the button, and in the same spot. Now to tie a knot, you can actually wrap your thread around there, and then you can put your needle sideways. That's your last little stitch. Put your needle sideways through the button. There's your loop. Put your needle through the loop, pull that tight, and then once more. That button is really nice and secure and really nice and neat. Okay, before I cut my thread though, I'm going to come out on the back of the felt. And notice that's the first time that I went to the back of the felt. Every other time I was just doing a stitch in and out. Okay. If you've got the shank button, it's exactly the same, but your needle goes wherever the hole is there. Oh my goodness, there. Your needle just goes through that hole and then through the fabric, through that hole, and then through the fabric. Okay? And then you'll do your other eye similar like that. Okay? Same thing. We're attaching the tail to the mouse. So at the bottom of the grade 8 cupboard, you're going to find a bin of these pipe cleaners. And we're going to attach it to the side of the body that you haven't done any of the work on yet. The other piece of the body is where you already put the ears and eyes, but the tail is going to go to the underside. Now you can imagine that if we just sewed this on straight, it would just pull off easily, right? So we're going to take an end and we're going to coil that up a little bit into a little circle, about like that. Okay, and then when we sew that in place, it won't be able to just pull out. This is actually going to be hidden inside the body of the mouse, so we won't see it at all. So now I'm using matching thread because we're going to be taking little stitches through this felt and I don't want it to show on the other side. But I've got my thread doubled up like we have been doing, and a knot in the end. Now I'm going to take a little stitch. The knot is going to get also hidden in on the inside of the body. So the knot is in here, and I'm going to take some stitches around that pipe cleaner. And they're just little small stitches. just going around it, in and out. So I'm not even pulling the needle out the back, right? I'm just doing those in and out stitches. And on the back, you really don't see anything. Okay, so I'll just do some more stitches. And they are small, and they're like barely going through the felt. Like they might be just going halfway through the felt, and that is totally okay. And I'm keeping it away from the edge because we want that edge free for when we go to sew on the body together. So once I've made my way around and I know that that's secure, it's not just going to pull off, then I can tie my knot in the exact same way we've been doing. Last little tiny stitch, and there's that loop that forms. Put my needle through the loop, pull it tight. One more time, and that little stitch even can just be under another stitch. It doesn't even have to be in the fabric. Last little time, and pull tight. Then you can cut your thread, and we're done. And on the other side, you don't see anything. Okay, try that, see how you do. Okay, our last video of how to put our mouse together. So you see I've got both ears on, 2 eyes, and then you need to do 3 different kinds of details, your own creative thoughts. So I put little eyebrows using a running stitch, and if you want me to show you the back stitch, if you want me to show you to do a back stitch, that's fine, I can do that. And then I used that shank button for the nose, and then I gave him a few little whiskers, so he's a very happy mouse. And now we're going to do an overcast stitch to go all the way around his body. So look at, there's the tail, that's going to be in the middle, and we have to leave a gap for stuffing him. So I'm going to leave a gap back here behind his ear. So I'm starting right here, right at his ear, with my knot hidden in between the 2 layers. Okay, I moved a little bit ahead there with this overcast stitch. I've come from where I started at the ear and then around his nose. So don't skip the nose. Some people just sort of jump right over, but you want to do nice little stitches all the way around. So let me show you that overcast stitch in detail. The overcast stitch is always just coming up like that. And it's the little stitches, nice and even, and trying to keep them all the same. And I'm going to stitch all the way around the body, just leaving that gap that I mentioned for stuffing. So just up and up. It's the simplest stitch, really. It's, well, almost as simple as the running stitch. And I wanted to show you going around the tail here. You just need to be careful that you're not wrapping your thread around the tail. Right? You want to just continue your stitches so that it looks just all the same all the way across. And kind of have to decide which side do I go on there. Okay, so I'm almost going to pause here because I want to have my opening. I'm going to sew to about here. Okay, so I'm just going to leave the needle hanging there. I'm not going to tie a knot. And I'm going to go inside and start putting in this cut up batting as his stuffing, right? So it's cut up small, and you're just going to put it inside his body. And push right down to the nose first, and then fill the rest of the body. Okay, that should be about good. And then it might help me if I pin that gap closed. Okay, and then we'll continue sewing that gap closed. And then you'll tie your knot just like normal at the end with the last couple little stitches and back through the loop. And then you're done. Okay, the last thing I'll show you. On that last knot, there's my first one, and then second. And then before I cut the thread, I just want to show you a little trick. When you've got a little stuffy like this, rather than cutting my thread right there, I'm going to put my needle in and come out anywhere. Come out anywhere on his body. Kind of pull that tight and then cut my thread. So any tail of thread would be actually hidden inside his body. There we go, I'm done my mouse. Okay, I hope you enjoyed making that mouse, and I hope you enjoyed the end result. You can use it for a little pin cushion if you want, but you might feel bad stabbing pins into him. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed making the mouse.